You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the business and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk to AAEP President Katie Garrett about what the organization has been working on this year. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Grice, business consultant and former equine practice owner. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2024 by CareCredit. Dr. Katie Garrett attended Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, where she obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in biochemistry and molecular biology in 1999. She then attended veterinary school at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, graduating with distinction in 2003. Dr. Garrett completed 2 internships and an equine surgery residency at Rood & Riddle Equine Hospital, achieving board certification in the American College of Veterinary Surgeons in 2012. Her main area of interest is diagnostic imaging, in particular, musculoskeletal MRI and laryngeal imaging. She heads Rood & Riddle's Equine's Diagnostic Imaging Department and is the 2024 president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners. Welcome, Dr. Garrett. It's great to have you back.
Well, thank you so much. I am so grateful for the invitation.
You know, the AAEP has been busy this year. There's a lot going on. Tell us about the various projects the AAEP's been working on.
Sure. So let me sort of talk about 3 main projects, and then there's a little odds and ends. So the 3 main things I want to talk about are some updates on the Sustainability Commission, then some of the governance challenges we've been working our way through, and then a biometric sensor project for thoroughbred racehorses. And then
wonderful
mishmash. Yeah. So, a lot of really exciting stuff. So as you very well know, the Sustainability Commission has been a real focus for the last few years. And the commission was never meant to last forever. It was really meant to kind of be a big kickstart and a big push into an area where it was obvious we needed to focus. Because if we don't have people choosing equine practice and then staying in equine practice, then we have no equine practice. So it was really kind of a jump start. And now we're a little bit over that initial phase. And so we need to move into something more sustainable, shockingly. So of the 5 different little subcommittee groups of the focus areas, they're going in slightly different directions. Sort of the main thrust is the work is ongoing. Sustainability is never finished, but it's going to take a more maintenance phase format. So, for example, the compensation and emergency coverage subcommittees, their main work is mostly done. There are some ongoing efforts that will be rolled into other committees. For example, we're going to periodically need to repeat compensation and fee surveys, those sorts of things. But that's something that now that it's essentially been institutionalized, the finance committee can take that over and make sure that we're gathering that data on an ongoing basis so that we can make comparisons and see where we are with that sort of stuff. The practice culture subcommittee is actually going to merge with the wellness committee and form a new committee called the Healthy Practice Committee. And what that group is going to do is really focus on wellness, both for veterinary team members individually, as well as the practice culture as a whole, because they're pretty interrelated. And so that seemed like a really nice synergy to kind of take the personal and the group and put them together, because there's a lot of overlap there. The internship subcommittee is going to roll into a new committee called the Early Career Committee that will deal with not just internships, but also all of these issues for people in, let's say, the first 5 years out of practice, because this is a really vulnerable group. And we want to make sure that this group is getting what they need from us in the way that they need it from us. So their first charge is really going to be, okay, well, what does this group want? How do we deliver it to them? And there are going to be a lot of young people on that committee, which makes sense because that's the group that they will know what they need best. And then they'll also take on the internship hub sustaining work as well. And so then students, they're right now, I think they're technically going to become a task force, but they will probably end up becoming a standing committee as well, just to take care and make sure we've got that pipeline going. And, they'll handle the outreach to schools, the faculty advisor role, strengthening that relationship with the student chapters, and then all of the student programming that we do either at the local chapters or at the convention. So that's kind of where we are with the sustainability stuff. And I mean, I look back and I can't believe what we've accomplished over the past couple of years. I mean, it's been just so gratifying to see where we were, because really, I think the tenor of the conversation has changed a little. When it started, it seemed like there was a little bit of despair almost. And now I think it's more of a, yes, we have challenges, but we can see steps that we can take and lights at the end of the tunnels. So I'm feeling a lot more positive than where we were a couple of years ago.
I would agree. It's phenomenal, the work that's been done.
Good. I'm glad
I
you
still
agree.
I still think there's some work to be done in bringing that feeling of positivity and that we can do this to the greater, I don't know, the people that aren't always tuned in.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is, I asked on Equine Vet to Vet, what do you think? How is this sustainability going? And they were sort of like, yeah, a little. That where those of us who have been working in the space, I think, can see a lot more of how far we've come.
Yeah, I think you're right. And honestly, that I think is one of the big challenges that the AAEP faces.
Yes.
It does so much stuff that it can, I mean, you can only send so many emails before people stop opening the emails. I mean, we're in an age of information overload with social media and emails and texts and all of that. It's a double-edged sword. It's amazing we have all of this stuff that the AAEP does, but it's also hard because you worry that you aren't getting all the stuff to the people because they're their bandwidth is completely full.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge. So, and that's a good point. And I think you're right that we need to maintain that focus on dissemination. Okay, so then the next area that I wanted to talk about was governance. So, the general membership meeting last year, there was a bylaws amendment that came up about changing the way the vice president officer position, which then moves up to president-elect, president, and then immediate past president, how that was going to be selected. And there were a lot of strong feelings and frankly, a lot of emotion from people in all sorts of different positions and experiences. And ultimately that motion got tabled at the general membership meeting last year. So, I sort of think that was probably a blessing in disguise because it allowed us to kind of pull back and regroup and say, okay, we need to really take a look at this more holistically and really look at what other things in the bylaws, what are we trying to accomplish here to make these bylaws reflect the organization as it is now and how our membership wants it to be in the future. So we formed a task force with a variety of, ages, practice types, genders, experiences with AAEP. So a pretty diverse group to delve into all of this. And there were surveys. You probably got these surveys, through email, and sort of through at the end of all of that process, the task force made recommendations on specific changes to the bylaws to the board of directors. And then now the board of directors has voted on those, and there's now a set that have been approved by the board of directors that will be up for a membership vote. And some of the changes are pretty small. Things like to make changes in language. So changing chairman to chair, for example, to be a little bit more inclusive. And there were, frankly, a few redundancies that didn't need to be in there anymore. And things to just better reflect how the organization actually does things. Like, when do officer terms actually start and end? Well, they actually start and end at the end of the annual convention, and that wasn't really clear in the bylaws. So those are what I would consider sort of minor, non-controversial changes, just things that need to be updated periodically. And then there were some things that are, I would say, sort of medium on the scale, which are mostly to do with how the organization functions. There were some things that really were like standard operating procedures, like SOPs that were in the bylaws that really probably need to come out so that they can be handled without needing to go through huge bylaws amendments. And so the example that I can think of is we have this document called the Policy for Membership Denial and Disciplinary Procedures. And this document does not get pulled out very often, but essentially it took the language of what was in the bylaws. So if there is some sort of, membership revocation that needs to happen, we have a policy for that. So really, we just need to reference the policy and the bylaws. We don't need to repeat all of this sort of nitty-gritty detail in there. So sort of cleaning up some of those kind of procedural things to, again, reflect how the organization works. And especially now in a more modern age, when things happen a lot more quickly than they used to when, we didn't have Zoom and all of those other sorts of things. So then there were the two things that I would consider the larger issues. So the first one was there's an amendment proposed that the membership will vote on to allow bylaws amendment via online voting versus at the general membership meeting. So to just explain how things happen now if the AAEP wants to amend the bylaws, it has to be done at the in-person general membership meeting at the annual convention, which generally about 100 people, maybe a little bit more, attend. And we have 7,500 members. And there's a lot of reasons why people can't actually go to the general membership meeting. Probably the number one reason being they're not at the convention. It wasn't their turn to go, or they have small kids and so they're attending virtual. Whatever it is. But really, we thought that it was so important that on big decisions like amending our bylaws, that we get the whole voice of the whole membership. And the only way to enfranchise the 7,500 members, all of whom are equally important, is to have online voting rather than having that voting be restricted to the 100 people who are able to show up to the membership meeting. So that, in my mind, is probably the most important amendment that's being proposed, is a shift from an in-person amendment process to an online process, because that way we can engage the entire membership, which is really the point. And then the second thing was this vice presidential selection process. And so as far as what is being proposed to change, the nominating committee process, which frankly, pretty much everybody agreed works very, very well. They do an amazing job, vetting candidate and really figuring out what are the needs of the organization right now and who might be some individuals who are ideally positioned to help the AEP deal with those particular challenges at any particular moment in time. So the nominating committee will still do all of their own work the way that they have done their work for many, many years. But instead of essentially putting forward one name for the board of directors to approve, they'll put forward two names if this amendment is approved, and then the general membership will vote. So essentially, it will become like the board of directors elections. Like we just got an email about that, I think yesterday, to vote. So instead of voting for just the two at-large board of directors members, you would, if this passes, have your, board of directors members plus the vice presidential election as well. And, again, this was probably the thing that had the most discussion about it because, there are pros and cons on both sides. We have a process that we've used for a long time, and it seems to have served the organization well. So you have that on one side, and you also don't want you don't want hurt feelings. If someone loses that sort of prestigious of an election, we certainly don't want campaigning the way that some other organizations have. One nice thing about the AEP is we have generally avoided campaigning and that sort of playing politics type thing, and no one wants to see that. But on the other hand, our membership wants to be more involved and have more of a say. And one question that really kind of hit it home for me was when I asked people who had been on the nominating committee. I've never personally been on the nominating committee, so I had to ask. So I asked a variety of people, and I said, when you are really coming down to it, is there really just one name that rises to the top, or is it a really tough choice between like two or three names? And pretty much everybody said, it's usually like there's two or three names that seem right for the moment, and it's really hard to choose between those two names. And so to me, it wasn't that we had a shortage of qualified people. It's that we have really good people, and maybe our membership wants to be able to have the say. So that's going to be voted on at this general membership meeting. And I know this answer has been incredibly long, but like just one more thing on this, how this is going to actually go at the general membership meeting is we're going to have, some sort of more secret ballot process as opposed to people just like standing up in the room and like actually going around and counting heads. It will probably be some sort of, text to a number, and then we'll have a staff member, counting all of those votes, but also have paper ballots available for those who might not be comfortable with a texting type option. But the first thing that we're going to vote on is the online amendment. And if that passes, then all these other amendments will be handled online to enfranchise the entire membership and make sure.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that was something that the board really felt very strongly about, that honestly, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of controversy about online voting. Pretty much everybody thinks that's a good idea because everyone can imagine a scenario in their own lives where they can't get to the general membership meeting, but want to have a voice. And so to make sure that it's not a small group of 100 or 200 people in a room making this big decision for the whole organization, we really wanted to make sure that, okay, if we can get online voting passed, well, great. Then we get to ask the entire membership, what do you want about everything else? So, we're going to be doing, more education. There's going to be more, emails and, a link to a little video about all of this. But to be honest, while I have this forum on this podcast, I figured I could go into a little bit because the last thing we don't want people to be confused or feel like anything is not as transparent as it could be. So that was a really long answer about governance.
It was wonderful because everybody really wants to know that stuff.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that so I do have a question.
Yes.
So will it be all set up so that the Second Amendment online thing will take place at the same time? So people have to be prepared and ready from home.
Great question. Yeah. So the online voting, what's proposed in the amendment is there's actually like a 2-week to 30-day voting period. Okay. So it's the sort of thing where if it passes, then, after the convention, that stuff will then go out to members. If online voting does not pass, well, then we're going to have to deal with these other larger issues, right in the meeting. So essentially, if online voting passes, which we think it will, well, great. Then, after the convention, after everyone's had time to, get home and think about it, we'll do that. But if for some reason it doesn't pass, well, then we will be prepared to move to, the in-person voting. So it's a little, that's why I wanted to explain it, because it is a little complicated. And your question was perfect because that wasn't clear in what I had said.
I wasn't sure if that was worked out yet. So yeah.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By helping to bridge the gap between cost and care, CareCredit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. Clients have a flexible way to pay over time for all types of care, and practices get paid in 2 business days. It's a payment experience everyone can feel good about.
You guys have done great work. I'm really excited to hear about it.
I'm really glad to hear that. And I hope that people understand how much time and really thoughtful dedication everyone has put into this to try and make the right decision. And, we know that not everybody will be happy with whatever decision happens because that's life. But we hope at least everyone can appreciate that we tried as hard as we can and are trying as hard as we can to do the best we can.
And the process seems like it has been a really, really good one.
I hope so. I think so. You have a good task force when there's a fair amount of dissent. But I really have to hand it to the task force. There was dissent and there were some hard conversations, but the level of respect and consideration was, top notch.
I wouldn't have expected anything different, just knowing veterinarians, equine veterinarians in particular. We're nice people.
Exactly.
People.
You're exactly right. It was, it reminded me what a great group equine veterinarians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let me shift gears and talk about this biometric sensor project. So social license to operate is a really hot button topic. It tends to sort of rise to the top of the news around racehorses, but to be honest, it's an issue in all of our equine disciplines where we have these athletes. I mean, it can be sport horses in the Olympics, it can be, Western performance shows, it can be anything. But one exciting thing is the AAEP put out a request for proposals for companies who have wearable technologies that they think could be appropriate to screen the entire thoroughbred racing and training population in the United States as a way to flag horses who might be in an at-risk group for further investigation. Because, we know that a big hole in our knowledge is, how do we find the horses who we're worried about before they actually have the problem? And that's so much harder than saying, yes, we found the problem that has already occurred. That's relatively easy. So this is a really big ask of the industry, all of these different devices. But I mean, we're kind of shooting big with this one because we think that the impact could be tremendous as far as horse and jockey safety. And I mean, really, that's what we all want. We want these horses to be as safe as possible. So these requests for proposals have gone out and we're kind of working through the details, but essentially the companies that are selected to receive funding and participate in this research project, it will happen with 2-year-old horses during 2025. And essentially large cohorts of horses will be wearing these wearables. The companies will have to report back on a level of concern for each animal. And then that will be paired up with the horse's history of, is this horse working? Is it breezing? Is it racing? Has it missed a couple breezes? And if so, we want to know why. I mean, did it colic? Okay, well, that's a non-musculoskeletal reason to not be breezing and totally valid. Or, was the horse lame? Okay, well, that's a musculoskeletal reason. So our real question is, can we find a sensor or sensors that could be useful to identify an at-risk population? And let me be clear here. These sensors are not meant to be used to say, oh, well, if you have X on your sensor, then you can't race. This is just meant to trigger another level of, veterinary evaluation. And the AAEP has no regulatory authority whatsoever. So really, what we're going to be doing is making a recommendation to HISA to say, hey, here is a technology or technologies that we think you might really want to look at because we think these could be useful for you in your efforts to keep horses safe. So that's, it's a pretty lofty goal, but I mean, this is a problem that we need to solve. And if it can be solved, in a relatively simple way to figure out, okay, well, here's our horses at risk, and then get those horses a little extra attention, that's what we need to aim for.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great project. Is this a project that's an AAEP project, or is it funded through the foundation, or is it like a joint thing?
That's a great question. So essentially the AAEP is, we have a small group who is evaluating these proposals and then will help evaluate the results. HISA is supporting this from a logistical point of view. So they are happy to provide someone to kind of collate all of the data. So kind of the legwork and sort of machinery of data collection, because the companies need to report this information to someone. And HISA was nice enough to be the someone. But as far as the funding, really, we're hoping that the horse industry is going to come together, and we're actively seeking funding from a variety of organizations, mostly on the thoroughbred side, and hopefully the Foundation for the Horse, will likely support it as well. Financially, in addition to the, volunteer time and logistical support like that. But we are really hoping that the thoroughbred industry, who genuinely seems to recognize this as a problem, people have kind of been looking for what to do. And so we're hoping that we're providing this and saying, hey, here's what to do. Can you contribute some money so that we can get this project done?
Great. So is it looking for concerns that are exclusively musculoskeletal, or will it, because I'm thinking about some of the horses we see in eventing or in show jumping who seem to have an arrhythmia, like they finish jumping and they fall over dead.
Yeah. So the main thrust of this project is musculoskeletal, but a lot of these companies also have, some sort of like they might have a cardiac monitoring parameter within their device as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a secondary goal. And obviously the companies with these devices, they're going to be able to capture all of their normal data in addition to the stuff that we're actually targeting. So we suspect that after this project is over, those companies will also have a tremendous amount of data on this group of horses. So we're kind of trying to pair up the technology companies with the people with the horses so that we can kind of get everyone working along the same direction and smooth out some of those barriers, because we have we have a relatively wide reach, and we hopefully have access to people who are wanting to fund this. So although cardiac things aren't the main thrust, they are definitely part of a lot of these different wearables profiles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So data may show up.
Yes.
Sort of unexpectedly.
Yeah, I think that these companies are going to get more data than we want, but great data for them in their efforts to develop these technologies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
It is. It's pretty exciting. And so then I just wanted to highlight a few just little odds and ends of things that the AAEP has done this year. I mean, we talk about these big projects and they are wonderful, but there's also a lot of smaller sustaining efforts that happen that sometimes we don't talk about enough. So, for example, all of the infectious disease and parasite and vaccine guidelines, those all get reviewed and updated regularly. And the infectious disease committee, they're just chugging away at this all the time. And these guidelines are getting refreshed. And they're not maybe the sexiest thing, but I'm pretty sure when all of a sudden you have a strangles outbreak and you want to know what to do, you're going to be extremely grateful for these nice, up-to-date, extremely comprehensive guidelines. So things like that. The Performance Horse Committee has just started a new Facebook group to encourage interaction in a little bit of a different platform than the listserv, just to give people another option. As you well know, the Decade 1 and Starting Gate programs are still going really strong, and we're, really proud to be able to work with you on that because they really seem to be making an impact, which is fantastic. We have the new XP labs, and the first one on ophthalmology is in October. And the last time I checked, there was only one spot left. But these are really hands-on, limited to 20 participants, 5 instructors, so 1 to 4 instructor to participant ratio. And we're really trying to give people that small group, hands-on, intensive experience where they can really come out of it and level their skills up on whatever the topic is. We are, the Horse Owner Education Committee. So you might have seen on social media all of these little infographics that are essentially really made for horse owners. And the AAEP shares it, but honestly, we encourage everybody to reshare on their own pages to reach their horse owners. And those have been very well received. And that committee actually put on a webinar targeted to horse owners, and over 400 people signed up to attend at the initial launch. And then it's been viewed a lot more than that as it's, because it was video recorded so people can watch it later. But it really seems like horse owners are hungry for this sort of high quality information. And some of the infographics aren't about medical topics. A lot are how do you know if your horse is overheated and what do you do? But some of them are also about how do you be a good client? Pay your bills on time and things like that, that honestly, it's probably a little easier for the AAEP to say that and you to share it, as opposed to you, the vet practice, coming out and saying, hey, clients, my particular clients, we want you to pay your bills. So the AAEP can deliver
absolutely.
the message in exactly, maybe a way that's a little less direct, and that might help some people. Let's see, there was a day at Santa Anita last year at the time of the convention for vet students to go and see what racetrack practice is like, either as a private practitioner or a regulatory vet. So exposing students to that career path. And there was just another one at Saratoga, and those went incredibly well. And then we had another task force about foreign veterinary graduates, for both the foreign graduates and the practices, to sort of talk about how can you legally employ these foreign graduates who are not licensed yet in the US, but also explain some of the pathways to licensure, because that can be honestly kind of confusing. So that was a really nice webinar. And there was a team of attorneys on that webinar to sort of help explain some of the legal issues that honestly, we as veterinarians are probably not as well equipped to understand. So those are just a few of the kind of random things that the AAEP has done this year that I'm pretty proud of that we did.
It's so much and it's so great. So there's a new website. So
yes.
If people who occasionally, change is hard, occasionally people struggle in finding what they're looking for. If they're struggling, what do they do? Do they email info at what do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. There have been some hiccups, and the search function was not amazing at first. And it's getting better. And the way, because I had actually exactly the same question. I'm like, I can't find anything. And the way that they explained to me is how the search engines work on the back end is really complicated, like how things are prioritized. And I guess it's not unusual for websites when they go live. You can't really figure out how actual groups of humans are going to use the website until you give them the website, and then they say, this doesn't work. And then behind the scenes, they can kind of make it work with the actual intended audience. So a lot of that stuff has gone on behind the scenes. But yes, if people encounter a challenge or a problem or something that just plain doesn't work, yes, just email, the general AAEP email address. And there are plenty of people both on the AAEP staff side and the website developer side working on this stuff. So no one should feel like it's their fault, because it is not. This is just part of the growing process.
Yeah. And it seems like once you get used to something new and you click around, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's where it is.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, at first getting used to where everything is, it's just really different, especially if you used to know, well, I do this, 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 and then I get to the page I want. And now it's different.
Right. And a lot of my presentations, I had made QR codes to the sustainability resources. So now I have to remake all of those.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. But that's okay, because the resources are worth it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. AAEP has fantastic resources. So, there's just so much. And I wonder, one of the ideas that I had is whether in the newsletter that comes out, if one of those resources that people may maybe not know about could be highlighted.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Highlight, and then just have a link to it, whether it's the, like you mentioned, Strangle's guidelines, or something, because there's so much in there.
Yeah, there really is. That's a good idea. I'll mention that to see if we can do that as a little spur feature thing.
Yeah, because it wouldn't take very much room.
No. Yeah. And most of the time when people come to you and say, I wish the AAEP had blank, a lot of times the response is,
we already have it.
Here you go.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So what about the foundation? The foundation for the horse is amazing. And some people don't realize this, but the board of the AAEP also serves the foundation as well. So you're up to date on everything that goes on. They've been busy accomplishing things too. And there's certainly been, so much bad weather and horses to rescue and fires and everything.
Yeah.
What should our listeners know about how the foundation is helping horses?
So the foundation does an amazing job of helping horses. And, you probably know there was a great, $12 million campaign that wrapped up a couple years ago. But just this past year, we got another $1 million gift specifically targeted for horses at risk, to help those types of horses that you were talking about. So the foundation kind of thinks about things in three main areas. So research, education, and horses at risk. And the horses at risk, like you were talking about, one big area where they have had a pretty nice impact is with helping with disaster relief efforts. And most of that is essentially figuring out which local group to partner with, because the people who are there, they know what they need. They know how to use the resources effectively. So a lot of what we do is just financial support. So money to buy hay, money to buy veterinary supplies, money to buy halters for horses who have, because unfortunately, sometimes the best thing for someone to do is just to turn their horse loose rather than, if they're not able to get the horse out. So all of those things cost money, and the Foundation for the Horse has really been able to help in that way. And another thing that I didn't always think about in the horses at risk category is the Equine Disease Communication Center. So, horses are certainly at risk of things like wildfires and abuse and neglect and war and all of those things, but they're also at risk of disease. And that communication center is a really powerful tool to get real-time information about disease outbreaks, and then also have those educational resources so readily available. Because, we know that horses at risk, that's not going to be a category that's going to probably ever go away. So that is a really important part of what the foundation does, is directly helping horses. And then a way that's a little bit one step removed maybe from helping the horse directly is the foundation's efforts in research. So we have to do research to get these untested ideas or new techniques or new drugs or new vaccines. We have to have the research so that that good idea can be tested and refined and eventually become a clinical practice tool that we can actually use. So the foundation does a really nice job of putting money towards funding a lot of these projects. And the foundation tends to want to fund projects that are maybe not like super benchtop, but kind of bridging that gap between benchtop and ready to go clinical. So for example, some of the projects that got funded this year were research on osteoarthritis, laminitis, soft tissue rehabilitation injuries, a test for strangles. So about $250,000 was given out this year to fund 6 of these different projects to really to make them happen. Because without this sort of grant money, these projects do not happen. And there are a lot of granting agencies. There's, the Morris Animal Foundation, the Grace and Jockey Club Foundation, but the Foundation for the Horse has really started to become another one of those organizations that can really put some serious money behind some of this research. And then additionally, there are young investigator grants targeted towards people earlier in their career to really kind of get their career going, so that we're continually replenishing the pipeline for these researchers that we need to do all of these really important things. So that's another really cool area where people can donate some money, which is really great. And then the last area is education. And that is a little bit of a broad category, but what it essentially does is that money is to go to support lectures and labs and scholarships and workshops, mostly for students and early career practitioners, but not exclusively. So the foundation gives over $500,000 out in scholarships to vet students. And as we all know, with the rising cost of education, including veterinary education, a lot of these scholarships can make a big impact. And we hope that that impact on reducing students' debt can help them make the career choice they want to make, not a career choice that is overly financially driven. So if someone is, sitting there looking at their loans, we want them to have a low enough loan burden that they don't feel that they have to go out and make $150,000 their first year out of school to service their debt load. So that's these scholarships, and some of them are, really pretty substantial and can make a big dent into that. And another thing that you might have seen recently in the Spur newsletter are these new Transforming Equine Practice grants. And so these are grants for organizations that are non-AAEP organizations that have programs that especially work towards efforts towards sustainability. And that can come in a whole lot of different ways, but that can allow a group that applies for and gets one of these grants, they're for up to $3,000 each, to offer scholarships for people to get to their programs, or maybe, have a speaker they might not be able to have gotten otherwise. So really this is a way to support some non-AAEP programs that are working in the sustainability space to make sure that this sort of stuff is available to people out there who want it. So those are some of the big projects the foundation has been working on. And I mean, ultimately, they all support the horse or the equine practitioner or the vet student. And that's what we want to do.
It is just amazing. Like when you think how much is done by this sort of interwoven, connected group of equine veterinarians and staff members of the AAEP, and the amount of things that get done and accomplished and just create all of this energy and, frankly, really great results every single year.
It is profoundly humbling. I mean, I don't think I can thank the AAEP staff and all of the volunteers for the AAEP for what they do. I mean, it is mind-blowing to see what our membership does. It's phenomenal.
You know, they always say if you really need something done and done well, give it to a busy person.
Yeah.
And maybe because equine veterinarians and AAEP staff members just knock it out of the park. And
you are totally right. Completely right.
Yeah, I'm really proud to be a member of the AAEP because it's a great organization. It really is.
I'm really proud. I'm really proud too.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this
thank
update.
You.
I mean, like it's going to just make people listen and say, wow, and lean into the organization because, wow.
I hope so.
I'm just blown away.
Well, and if people have other questions or want more information, they should totally feel free to contact me or the AAEP office or their board, a board representative. Really, I mean, don't be afraid to reach out. All of those people are thrilled to talk to you and answer your questions and get your feedback on things that you wish the organization were doing or are happy the organization is doing.
Yeah, engagement is something that is so important for organizations to be successful because if you don't hear from your members and know what they want, how can you possibly deliver it?
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's, it can be like a quick, 2-line email. It can be anything anybody wants, or it can be a long phone conversation. I don't care. Whatever, however people want to do it is great with me.
Yeah. Thank you again for being with us. And thank you all for listening to the Business of Practice podcast. And a great big thanks to our sponsor, CareCredit. And to all my listeners out there, be brave, embrace change,